G'day and welcome to the Feed Central webinar recording. For this recording, we have excluded the Grower Awards. However, there will still be mention to the Grower Awards throughout.
Okay. Thank you for joining the first Feed Central webinar. Thanks to the team for coordinating this. We've got Jock Jackson in the background as our moderator, and we'll be able to keep things moving along if there's any technical issues. So thanks to Jock and everyone else in the Feed Central team. I'd also like to welcome John McHugh, the Executive Officer of the Australian Fodder Industry Association. It's wonderful to have John and AFIA's support for our webinar and also for our Hay Quality Awards. So there's three sections of the webinar this morning. The first one is the Fodder Market overview. The second section is the presentations of the National Hay Quality Awards. And the third section is a Q&A session where you'll get to ask some questions. Feel free to ask questions as we go using the Q&A function, which is down in the bottom, probably the bottom middle of your screen, but it's simply a Q&A function. We expect that the whole webinar will take about an hour. And so you're welcome to have some lunch and join along with us. If anyone's got a 5G connection, I'd ask that they disconnect because we don't need the transmission of coronavirus throughout the states via this webinar. So if you are on 5G, if you could disconnect, please. So that's my attempt at humour for this webinar. We'll get into it. My name's Tim Ford. I'm the Managing Director of Feed Central. It's a great pleasure to be here with you all today during these difficult times throughout the country. Just a little bit about the company. We turned 18 this year, so 18 years old. Firstly, a little bit about me. As I said, my name's Tim. There's really two great loves in my life, and that is my family, my crazy family, and the crazy business called Feed Central and the fodder industry. So we try and balance the two and keep life as normal as we can. This year, Feed Central became 18, and we just had a quiet celebration on the veranda of the office. We have an amazing team of people that work to make this organisation happen and to service clients. And that's a photo from this morning of our team. It's certainly a team that packs above its weight and gets a lot of things done from logistics, quality assurance, feed testing in the laboratory, in-field inspections, and sales, logistics, and our recently opened retail outlet. A few things we've focused on this year is our debtor control and our contract management. We've always put a lot of focus on these. We've been tightening the screws up on that regard. And that work has ensured that we're able to pay every account within due terms. And we've been doing that for 18 years straight. And I think as we go into these difficult times, it's important to make that point that Feed Central has a very strong record of financial management and contract management, and that is only going to strengthen in the future. So thank you to all the truck drivers who get their weighbridge dockets in on time, and thank you to our staff and everybody else that's involved in ensuring that our contracts are extremely well managed and our debtors are very closely managed and controlled. The other things we've been working on this year is the upgrade to our quality system, and we've got things that we're about to launch for the new season in relation to our quality systems, and so we're excited about that. We've been investing heavily in our web platform and ensuring that it's mobile friendly, and we've got work in progress for the development of our app. So we've got a big development agenda on. Also working on ensuring that when possible, we've got people out and about on the farm. So we're running the balance between good old fashioned up the driveway service, combined with telephone service, combined with very extensive and an extremely effective web platform. that ensures that we can offer great service to buyers and sellers throughout the country. This year, we've also seen an ongoing growth in our feed testing business, and there's no doubt that we'd now be one of the busiest feed testing labs in the country, receiving samples from all over the place. And as I stated before, we've recently reopened our retail business, which is also an exciting chapter for us here at head office. I'm going to hand over to Kieran Maxwell now. Kieran's our General Manager handling and Key Account Manager for the feedlot and corporate sector of the market. Kieran's going to give us an overview of the feedlot sector. So welcome, Kieran.
G'day everybody. Thank you for joining us today, and thanks Tim for the introduction. As Tim said, a part of my role, various parts of my role, but one part of my role is to sorry, I'm just going to get this right. One part of my role is taking care of certainly the majority of our feedlot sector through Feed Central, whether that be providing strategic purchasing advice, looking after their contracting, doing quality assurance with them, and various other training as well. So you'll have to, although all of my presentation is not about hay straight up, I certainly will be touching on that, but I'll be endeavouring to paint a picture for you of a certain market that we deal with, some of the past effects on this market, and of course the current, including what needs to change and what is required for both market and feed input for them. There are some important take-homes at the end that I'll go through, and I hope that will cement some thoughts for you moving into the 2021 season and beyond that as well, because there's no doubt with what we're facing at the moment, it's going to be certainly long into 21 and more likely into 22 as well. I'll also touch on fodder quality and go through a couple of points with you there as well. So basically, if we look back at most of 19, and even before 2019, so this kind of covers a fair period of 12 to 18 months before COVID and before the rains of February. If we look at that, obviously we were dealing with prolonged dry conditions. There's really not much more to say about that. They were historically the worst on record, and we know that. We've seen it and felt it, many have. And we feel for those that did go through that and continue to go through that to now. Cattle sale and yarding, it remained constantly high through this period and well priced for entering the feeder and feedlot sector. And also behind that was the ferocious demand for the quality cuts of meat, both export and domestically as well. So there was a large access to large numbers of cattle. Yes, some of them were drought affected, but you know, they were also, some of them were very, very good as well, because we all knew and felt, and many of you would be probably on here today that spent your hard-earned and dollars and effort feeding those animals to keep them as long as possibly could before they entered into say a sale yard to move wherever it was going to be, a processor or a feedlotter. So record high commodity prices all round. So through the most recent periods of seasons, we've seen the highest ever, and certainly in the fodder sector, and the dovetail of that is it was causing record high feed ration prices. So prices of carcasses out the other end had to follow and support that as well. So demand for fodder was coming from all types of feed operations, not just what I'm talking about today. So, you know, the related commodity markets, be it wool or meats or whatever, they were backing the dollars that would been spent on those products. Domestic and export demand for quality meats, there's no doubt world demand for protein remained strong, and through that period with no real major competing forces. The emergence of further risk and international impacts regarding swine flu did float around there in the background and is still talked of today. But you know, locally, basically the export demand, the Australian branded box processed meats of quality cuts is a key indicator of this sector. Cattle on feed remained at record levels, and what we saw there through that entire period, and you still see it to this day, even though things are very tight. Planned feedlot expansions for many operators just steamed ahead, and whether that be milling or feeding, producing infrastructure, while at the same time they were increasing cattle capacities as well. So those investments were certainly there. If we look at some of the, obviously directly related to COVID, and we don't want to dwell on this for too long, but it's impacting everyone and everything. So it is important that we talk about it to a certain market. So what happened? Well, there's a complete drop off on the regular and consistent demand of processed box beef, especially into the premium end of the market. A virtual shutdown of the domestic food services sector. So, and that was coming from obviously major hurt from higher end of the market, and there were pubs, restaurants, hotels and events. So I think what's missed there is that we say higher end market. Now, Australia produces large amounts of meat and consumes large amounts of meat through those sectors, and they do go through the premium market of the product as well. So when we say premium market, it's not just going to premium export. There is a large domestic consumer base of that premium meat as well. So we all heard it and seen it in the news. There's been impact on meat processors relating to bans, outbreaks or other market influences. We've dealt with unsettled global beef markets. With the US at the moment, there's various shutdowns there. We don't know what's going to happen when that does virtually all open. Big consumers of meat themselves, but what will that do to the international market is yet to be seen. So basically, we're talking about the possible volatility of the market moving forward. Compared to domestic processed beef market by numbers, live export has remained the lesser of the affected two, and that's very much in the north effect of cattle, and it's the lesser of the effect in the beef sector in general. To a degree, the same can be said for processed box market to export. If you look at numbers on those, and I haven't produced them or put them up in slides for you today, but if you do look at numbers on those, they've been reasonably firm through that period. So what of the now? And this is where we come into probably the more meat of the sector. So our national herd is at historical lows, led by the largest destocking period ever experienced. And I've got some numbers of put-throughs as well, so you can see where that has gone. So basically, that's expected to remain so while the herd rebuilding phase is on. While that's in the driver's seat, as in herd rebuilding. For how long? It's a watch this space. It could be 2 years. It's really a bit of an unknown, but you would expect that it's going to require at least a reasonable period of time for rebuild. Unfavourable high cattle prices, and I'm talking into the feeder market, obviously is heavily decreasing margins for lot feeders and processors all round. Now, on this, we've got to also consider that those users, those sectors are still feeding a higher priced commodities of past and current contracts. So that's not really helping the balance sheet right now, and will continue to hurt until new season. So leading to that, lower input prices. There's no doubt desperately are waiting for new season grain and fodder and other inputs. And from there onwards, obviously the extreme pressure on ration pricing reduction is required. This includes pressure from other alternate roughages. So, there'll be other roughages that they'll be looking at in a competing market on a price point value basis as to how they can get that ration price down. Excuse me. So if we look at the feedlot sector, so cattle on feed, and the recent figures are just out, I believe, and I haven't updated this, but if we look at the December quarter, finished at a record of nearly 1.3 million head on feed. So, and basically, historically, if we look back on the effects on this market, it is proven that when it experiences major events such as drought-breaking conditions, moving on from very high commodity prices, and other negative forces, be it a chink in the market for export or something, a 20% reduction of cattle on feed is not unusual, but it's expected. So, that's the kind of barrel that we could be looking down for. And as I said, I don't have the updated numbers that I believe come out very, very recently, either today or yesterday. So, therefore, cattle on feed is likely to remain down from the record highs of the last 2 to 3 years. Again, how long this is for is little unknown, and pretty much that's what the market is saying right now. January to March quarter, to give you an idea of the size, so the January to March quarter decreased by 12% alone from the December record. So you would expect we're going to see a drop percentage again. So you can see that we're quickly running to that 20% and may get there fairly quickly. You know, hopefully it will stop at that and no more. A standout decrease was Queensland, obviously large feedlot driven up here. That was down alone by nearly 114,000 heads. So that represented a 16% drop in that one region alone. So not to dwell on that too much, I'm going to just bring up a chart for you there, which is basically cattle numbers on feed over time. And the reason I brought this chart up is just to have a quick vision there on the effect of wet. And the same effect is on cattle prices. So if you were looking at the Eastern Young Cattle indicators for various weights and ages, you would see the opposite. You'd see prices go up quite considerably since February. And if you looked at those graphs and then you considered what the price of feed was at the moment that they're still feeding down those animals, you'd certainly see and understand that the balances are not quite working at the moment. What you can see here, I'll go straight to say that 1920, you can see the line, a very clear line dropping very, very sharply. And then again, we saw that closest period to that back was in that 16, 17 period where we saw some last wet, and you can see that gap, that line coming down very, very strongly as well. The rest of it is really a building industry with small dips here and there, but certainly we can see some large dips that have had a major effect on those markets. Back to as far as 07, 08, really more drought affected than anything else, and then the rebuild of the market there afterwards. So what of the now, if we're looking a little bit more in that, high demand for cattle, basically from the restocker and grass-fed grazier sectors. So feedlots and processors competing for the same reduced pool of livestock, and that's going to continue for some time, which will more likely keep prices up there and budgets strained. COVID-19 disruptions. What are the further lockdowns? None of us know at this stage. So further disruptions to the feed services industry and possibly the export sector would just place further economic strain all round within the industry. World demand for meat and protein and quality meat cuts. Confidence remains high there. COVID aside, the likes of China appear to be moving further out of shutdowns, and here is hoping that all of that still continues and the exports move in a positive and upward direction. So fingers crossed there, and hope that we see again have no effect on the COVID side of things. On the cattle turn-off side, it is forecasted to remain at its lowest point compared to the 21% rise in the December quarter. They're really, really big numbers. That's nearly 900,000 rise in the December quarter. So the direct opposite is happening at the moment, or certainly is forecasted, as the national beef production is expected to decline by about 16%, which would equate to about 2 million tonnes. Now that's obviously directly relating to the rebuilding of herds, especially across Queensland and New South Wales, plays a big part, and it does most of the items mentioned here, but that's certainly rebuilding that herd plays a big part as well. Now by percentage, the good thing is that by percentage of the national herd, whatever that is, and whatever it settles at and whatever it builds to, the finishing of cattle through the feedlot sector will be watched closely. But you would expect that it would remain and still remain the menu and the choice. So it'd be the driver of that menu. So whatever happens within the building sector of the cattle, you would expect that those percentages then that rise will start to happen again once the numbers start to improve as far as head. So although margins are forecasted to remain extremely tight, we need to look at what will assist the outlook moving forward for the feeders and consumers of large quantities of fodder, be it hay or straw. So markedly lower commodity prices back from record-breaking highs will assist. The export market remaining firm and possible growth. Conditions continue to supply herd and rebuilding, leading to an increased cattle on feed in the future. So that's what I was talking about, the rebuild and the percentage of heading through that sector and chewing the hay and straw that you produce. Lack of COVID-19 influences on the higher end of the domestic market. What we really don't want to see is just any of those at all. And the Australian dollar remaining world trade competitive. So just looking at feed input forecast for 2021, and I line it up saying based on a favourable season conditions, and I put in there a La Nina watch, although I've got a space there, I think that's wrong. A portion of buyers at the moment, and I'm going to say estimated probably 50% or plus, more likely remain long on existing contracted supply, and some considerably. So the higher price fodder contracts of old season are going to linger, causing a negative effect on ration prices. Early indications of new season pricing is expected to assist in the vital need of ration price reduction, which I've mentioned numerous times now. And new season fodder, it will, and it certainly must play its part in that. Due to current events and conditions, exits or washout requests of old season contract feed supply have had to be managed. What I will say there is that a good number of agreed contract extensions have assisted largely in completely avoiding such actions. And that's demonstrating the link to the long cover of feed here. So those two are combined. Basically, extreme caution is expected from the feeder market when contracting new season commodities. We expect large end users of fodder and grain to hold back purchasing supply of extensive cover into 2021, where they would normally be considering and liking a price and grabbing that for 10 to 12 months. I think we're going to see that they will be holding back and purchasing at a lower number for a shorter spread, and then watching things as they progress. And to be clear, that's not unusual for a season such forecasted. So, and all of the factoring decisions below come into that. So they're either long contracted on old season supply. There are firm predictions of a large national crop causing high certainty of an abundance of commodity. And we've got the bomb forecast lining that up as well. We need a market price reset across all the inputs. Time on side, so there's time there to closely watch the harvest results and await best options. Yes, we could end up with a really wet harvest, and decisions there could be changed reasonably quickly, and strategic decisions could be changed in those boardrooms. Considerable drop in overall feed commodity demand. So what I'm saying there is the non-feed lot. So while conditions remain up for graziers, the demand on hay and straw and other feed inputs for other users remain reasonably low. So that has a big impact on the moving of new season product. There's extreme pressure on reducing the ration price. I've said that over and over again because I feel that pressure myself, because it is required to keep these businesses successfully operating at a level that they can stay sustainable at. So I say their unsustainable ration price is just another option. The possible continued negative effects of COVID-19. So basically, is it what are the output stability? We need that output stability on the other side. It's desperately required to stay strong. So from all of that, I've tried to put together the best possible take homes that I can come up with at this stage, and I'm sure Nev might have some more, and Tim might have some more as well. But if we look at the market in general, have your storage organised. Product's not going to move off the paddock as it has over the last 2 years. That's just a given. Those tonnes certainly will be down, and more likely down by a large percentage. You can never say they won't be there, but they'll certainly be down by a considerably large percentage compared to what we've experienced over the last 2 years. High quality matched with high density bale weights. Again, it's the key to efficiencies. I've mentioned storage, and that just adds to the efficiencies of that storage. And is what is going to be required for the forecasted season. If the season requires it, sacrifice that quantity of yield for quality. So depending on what the season is going to bring you in conditions, be it wet, dry or indifferent, please go for that quality, because that's what's going to drive the early sale rather than the later sale. Leading into my next comment is that lower quality product will take longer again to sell and move. Be patient. Don't rush the curing. It's not a time to do that. It's not going to be the season to rush the baling. Avoid high moistures at all costs. the usual things that you've heard, I'm sure, over and over. Being a percentage back on colour from a bit of bleaching is better than having sport product or the worst still, burning a shed, yours or others. This is it needs to be said, have your finances ready for a possible prolonged selling period. Now, that is not always possible. It's hard. You know, we know the input costs are there, and you need to move some product immediately as much as you can at the start, maybe to cover some of those. But look, we do warn that have finances ready for possibly a prolonged selling period. The market will not necessarily be coming to you this season. Sellers will wait, and to a degree, the market will need to be prepared to come to the market on price and spread. So I'll move on now to quality. I've got a comment there, basically a line saying it's the primary production driver, and it is. When I visit our feedlotters and when I go into feedlots to look at the ration itself, or look at bunks, or look at what they're tub grinding, it is the primary production driver. Everything else that's going down the mouth of that cattle, it needs to be joined with quality hay and quality straw. We're also dealing with a large quantity of longer fed cattle. And there's no doubt they're going to remain the large driver within that cattle market, particularly export. It's usually a higher return per weight animal for this feed sector, and feed inputs for those animals just have to be at the highest quality. There's no gap there at all. And when I say there's no gap, there's no tolerance for low quality, which is what I'm saying next. Tolerance for lower quality or varied quality feed. Bunk attraction is paramount. So when we talk about aroma in a ration, and we talk about texture in a ration, it is absolutely key in so many areas within that feeding sector. So I'll end with a slide with some photos here. You can see that I've had Jock go to an extreme on a last visit to a feedlot to really get in there and check that the quality is okay. So he survived. I don't think he put on too much weight, but he certainly survived. He didn't eat enough of it. So this just gives you a picture of some of the things we do. So, you know, basically the quality of intake hay is vital. This is the hay. So if we talk about the different sectors of hay that comes into feedlots, if we look at, I've spoken about aroma. Aroma is paramount. You may not know, but cattle have receptors that are directly linked to the brain that controls what they want to eat, and want to eat from particular sources. So the reason that is because they can't see what they're eating. So that's important. It's vitally important, but not to mention that 30 to 40% of all feed consumed is done just to maintain weight and not gain weight. So again, the quality of that feed, and to be able to get everything else out of that feed via the roughage, to make use of the grain and the oils and the molasses and everything else that goes in, we need that quality hay to go with it. Ration texture and fibre not only drives the gut, but also the enjoyment of the chew. So when it's good, the cattle like to continue to chew on it. When it's not, they tend to spit it out and not enjoy it so much. In the end, they need to want to head to the bunk and eat. They do not just walk to the bunk for anything. And I think that's very important for us all to get that picture when you're feeding this market. Intake hay, the quality of intake hay is vital. It's the hay that is received as the cattle walk off the beef bus. The risk of mortality at this point is at its highest in most cases. The reason is being they've travelled long, they need to eat when they walk up that truck immediately. The quicker the animal eats, the quicker the animal drinks and enjoys both at arrival, there is a lesser chance of issues with that beast moving forward into the feedlot itself. So to end, a few more comments. Basically, we continue to see quality expectations lift across this entire feeding sector year on year. To this end, we've actually established an end user training session, which is covering fodder quality assurance and the intake of fodder itself. This has been released. We've released this across our feedlot customers, training their teams and managers face to face on what makes for quality fodder and what they are to be looking for, and the vital checks that they must implement if they haven't done already, on arrival, on feed coming on arrival. We've been providing the information, the tools for them to do this and do it very, very well. Now, the feedback on those learnings from those teams involved so far and the managers involved has been absolutely exceptional. It's been needed, they've enjoyed it, and it's certainly, they're well on the ball in regards to quality coming into their feedlot. Not just for hay and grain, but not just for hay and straw, but also grain as well. So to put it bluntly, overall with my presentation, whether it be the quality of feed, but certainly on the supply and disruptions to this area, any major disruptions in supply or demand within this feed sector can directly affect the percentages of unsold fodder remaining in sheds. So we need to see this sector perform well, receive quality feed, and gain weight on those animals as best and in the most efficient way that they can. Now, the same can be said if below quality feed is supplied. So we don't need a disruption in non-quality. We need great quality going into all of these feeders at all times. So, lastly, I'd like to thank all fodder suppliers. That includes the growers, to the truck drivers, but certainly the growers and suppliers that have delivered on their ability to supply fodder to a required standard for anyone that is feeding within these markets. Remember that you're helping to feed and supply safe quality beef domestically and worldwide, and that's why we're here. Happy cows is a happy result for all, so we do thank you for that and the effort you put in there, because we do know it is an effort to produce quality product. So thank you very much. I'll now throw you over to Neville Janke.
Thank you, Kieran, and good afternoon to all that are gathered and listening to this report. And I just wanted to take you through a little bit more of a snapshot from the sales side of it, and just give you a little bit of an overview of what's been happening on the eastern side of this great country we call Australia. Now, from my section of it, we've seen some of the greatest drought that we could have. We've seen the greatest demand on hay stocks due to the bushfires. We've seen floods. Now we've got a virus. So we see some of the producers and the end users being pushed to the absolute limit. What was considered the impossible, we've had to achieve the possible. We saw the true Aussie spirit really become evident, and it was definitely something that to be admired. Just take it to you to the next section of the market drivers that was there. We see that the stresses within the market, the business worry, the uncertainty. We saw the widespread rain then bring the market to a screaming halt. Kieran showed you that so helpfully on the on his graphs that he put up, which was great. He gave you the numbers. I'm not going to bore you with any more numbers, but they're there, they're real. Dairy farmers have welcomed the pasture. We've seen rain-grown oats and rye and the ability to further reduce their costs, and the purchasing of hay and silage and so forth from the neighbours and up the road, their own operations. We've seen pit silage really come into its own, and then plastic wrap bales and things for their own winter feeding and the end of winter feeding and then into spring. So we've seen a real drop off then in the demand for purchased hay. So a lot of times we say that the Weather Bureau has got a lot to do with what happens, and they watch their predictions very closely. Our phones stop ringing when they predict another big rain front coming across. So uncertainty in weather predictions, uncertainty in seasonal changes. So there's a lot of uncertainty out there for those buyers that are looking for hay, but things are easily changed from wet to dry at the snap of a finger, as we often say. And just travelling there through some of the parts of Queensland over the last little bit, and we see from the top end it's getting very dry, and then it changes as we move down that great state. But I just thought of the general uncertainty in the market due to the global conditions too. lower cattle numbers, and Kieran's touched on that, so I won't go into that in any great depth, but they're just some little things that are driving the market. We look at the market outlook over the next 3 months, we could say limited movement of hay, and we're seeing that already. And protein hay, yes, it's still being sourced. There's some dairies still hopping into that protein market, lucerne and vetch, looking for the protein to build their milk production in this higher priced, and with some of them higher priced yields and so forth. Barley and wheat straw, we've seen that going into the background operations where they're feeding lush oats and rye just as a binder, as a roughage content, and that's working quite well. In 6 months, we see there's a lot of focus at the moment on new seasons and what's around the corner, what's coming. Kieran's touched on it very nicely about the different season and what could happen if it's if there's an early frost or if we've got a lot of rain that comes in, that we could see downgrading of hay. But vetch hay, and what vetch hay is still in sheds at the moment, will be in the box seat. Anything that has strings around it now could be very much sought after if there's some weather damage that comes through. So one message I'd like to have would be, don't pin any hopes on a big flurry of buyers off the paddock this year, as we would have seen last year and the year before. It was quite phenomenal that hay was selling straight out of the back of the bale chamber, but I don't think we're going to see that quite as much this year. I guess just to mention also, to work on a storage plan, have a look at whether you can source another shed, or you can fill the sheds that you've got. Shedded hay always sells the best. So looking at then at a little bit more long range forecast of the winter buyers that we've got in the next 9 months of winter cereals and protein hays and so forth for the backgrounders and the dairies, that's always required as we move into 2021. So that will be a demand. There will be demand there. There's always a demand in the winter, so that will happen. So then the regional outlook, as I said, in some of my travels from far north Queensland back into central Queensland, down to the bottom end of Queensland over the last little bit, most of those areas have missed a decent wet season. So you're going to see still some movement of hay into those areas. Supplements are being fed at the moment, a lot of the molasses feeds and salt blocks and so forth, just to feed out of the last bit of standing dry pasture. And then they're drawing on the hay reserves that's in those areas at the moment. So most of the bull feeding operations, they're feeding for their annual bull sales if they're allowed to have them. Most of them have got them booked already, so they're finishing off animals and getting that happening. So some of them are purchasing some of the southern cereal hays out of Victoria, the better quality energies and proteins. They're looking to just to shine things off with a little bit of a grain mix going in with them. South Burnett, Darling Downs, Western Downs, all that bottom corner of Queensland, very marginal moisture. A lot of crop there at the moment that has been sown is only just poking its head out the ground, and some of it not even going to make it. So they're desperately looking to the heavens to watch for the next change to come through to see if they will actually get something that they can either make hay or grain out of. It was a very much a dry autumn sowing for those areas. Northern Rivers, Central New England, Central West, best season for a long time. And you see a lot of the guys there tell you that there's cattle up to their bellies in feed. So that's absolutely spectacular. So very little movement this year into that New England area or even Northern Rivers area of New South Wales. Yes, where we would normally have truck after truck rolled up into those areas. Southern New South Wales, not a lot of setbacks there in that area, everything going very well. They've had some rain now through those areas, and there's been a lot of pasture and herbage coming through. So that's been well catered for. So as we move into that Monero and Bega, as you would have seen with weather reports and so forth, that last change that came through, that was absolutely welcome relief for those guys in that area. They really appreciated seeing that because they had been the dry section. There had been a lot of hay moving to that Monero area, and they're very, very thankful for that last weather change. Bega then was abnormally dry too for this time of the year. Victoria, well, the old general rule of trade that happens in there from the west to the east, that's continued. And you're seeing that hay going to the Gippsland and so forth and feed those cattle, and they're doing not too bad with some of the latest rain come through there. A lot of growers are reported to seeing will see and some carryover stock 2020 hay into 2021. Just be prepared of that. But we saw that happen in 2016. All that hay then moved in 2017. So don't panic about that. But never forget that the 2021 hay is not in the shed yet. So anything that could happen, we could see, high yields, high NDF, etc., and the different protein levels and energies slip from that. South Australia, if we move around into South Australia, limited buyers in that market. So that just gives you a little wrap up from my side of the desk, and we'll hand over now to Tim Ford as he takes on the next part of this presentation. Thank you all.
Thanks, Nev and Kieran, for two very thorough presentations there. I just wanted to to wrap that up. I wanted to put that into the context of what Feed Central's experienced. So over the last 3 years, 2017, 18, 2018, 19, 2019, 20, we've done between 100 and 130, 140,000 tonnes of hay through our books on a sale contract delivered basis for those years. I just wanted to give a view that share a little bit of information with you that most of you probably would have experienced also. 42.65% was in the first 6 months of 2017-18 versus 57% in the last 6 months of that year. 16 was a similar trend. 18-19 was a similar trend with almost 50-50 delivered over the first half of the year and the last half of the year. But this year we still did our big tonnages, but it was all done and dusted. 78, nearly 80% of it was done in the first 6 months of the year, with only 21% of the hay that we sold for the 19-20 financial year sold in the last 6 months of the year, which speaks 1,000 words for the market. Just to wrap up what Kieran and Ned said, we've seen the drought. Contract across the country. We've seen a large amount of dry feed in the north and ideal pasture conditions in the south, combined with low stocking rates, and adjustment has been available where needed to help with the feed gap, which wasn't available during the drought. We've seen the COVID issue affect the 5-star and hospitality end of our customers market in particular. There's ongoing reports of the wet spring, and as Nev said, every time BOM comes out with a La Nina watch, the phones go quiet again. And in my view too, the 150k instant tax write-off for machinery had a big effect on the fodder market. The money was spent on buying new machinery and not spent on buying hay in that May-June period as we lead up to the end of the financial year. And we saw that previously in the when Kevin Rudd did his instant tax write-off during the global financial crisis, and of course general poor confidence in the market. So just to summarise what's going forward for 2020-21 season, quality is going to be important. We'll talk more about that in a minute. High density bales so that we can store and freight the hay as efficiently as possible. Organise the shedding, and most importantly, organise finance so that the last thing we want to see is the market affected by the person who needs to sell hay the most, or the person who needs cash the most. So if we can organise our shedding and our finance for an extended selling season, that's normal. The last few years haven't been a normal market where it's been selling off the baler. So if we organise our sheds and our finance for a normal selling season, which is 12 months, then we'll all be in a better place than if we if the market's discounted by the person who needs cash the most. So to get a little bit more specific, and it's always dangerous for a national webinar or a webinar that's being broadcast nationally to start spitting out hay prices on the screen. So, but I knew if we didn't do it, we'd be left with a lot of answers at the end. So bear in mind, these prices don't necessarily apply to every region, and there's a lot of if, buts and maybes around them, but they're certainly a guide. So we're expecting a return to historical price positions, which is return to long-term historical average prices. At this stage, unless there's a major wet through spring and summer, we're not seeing a long-term, extremely low price. Even if it was to turn very, very dry, I don't think the cattle are there to see an extremely high price either. So return to historical average prices. The best way to go forward is to differentiate on feed tests, differentiate on visual quality, differentiate on bale weights and location. And our system does that extremely well. Our web marketing system, which has extensive customer use, it gives delivered price to customers. And subsequently, I encourage you to log on and experiment and play with our web-based system, because it gets a lot of use from buyers. Gives delivered prices, so heavier bale weights and high visual quality and high feed test are extremely easy for buyers to sort on our system, and it's an extremely popular system. So we're estimating on a Northern Victorian hay price of between, for cereal hay, it's a very wide berth. It probably 150 to 250 per tonne. So the 250 per tonne is probably going to be closer for an export oaten hay grade oaten hay, and the 150 per tonne would be more like a barley or a wheat that can't go into the export market. We're working there based on a 600 kilo bale weight ex-farm plus GST basis. Lucerne hay, we'd hope that we can maintain the $300 a tonne mark ex-farm Northern Victoria, and potentially 300 to 400 depending on bale weights, depending on quality and feed test for lucerne hay. Vetch hay will float somewhere in the middle of those. Probably vetch hay is well regarded in the market now. Good vetch hay gets differentiated very well on our web-based system based on protein and energy, and if it's shedded and good colour, it'll present well to the market. Just want to go over, moving towards our quality, National Hay Quality Awards. Just want to talk about quality a little bit more. Over the years, we've come up with a general wide-ranging specification that we see across most customers in the domestic market. Of course, this excludes the equine industry, which we don't really focus on, but the large segment of the market being for the large square bales, the feedlot, dairy, beef backgrounding sector and so forth, are generally looking for that 9.5 megajoules of energy. They're looking for a very good visual grade. We use our Feed Central A grade as the basis, which is a minimum score of 600 for those that are familiar with our grading system. An 8x4x3 bale, bale weights over 600 kilos, and shedded with a moisture of less than 18% as a general specification. I would just say, while I've got you in relation to bale size, if we're thinking about bale size, go shorter, not longer. The shorter bale size is a little bit more convenient for storage in some people's sheds, more convenient for loading onto trailers and handling on farm, putting into mixing, putting into feed bunkers as well as feed racks and so forth. So, a 7.5 foot bale, I think we're going to see a trend there that we just drop our bale size, our bale length down a fraction, over the coming years, especially now that we're getting such good bale weights. We can probably just drop our length down a fraction, would suit customers a little bit better, and it's probably not very hard for us to do. Fodder, so of that specifications, out of the, we inspected roughly 300,000 tonnes of hay last year across the country, and we saw 97% of the hay reach a energy of 9.5. 68% achieved the minimum visual score. 81% achieved the 8x4x3 bale status. 97% were over 600 kilos, which is just a massive improvement on previous years. And storage, 65% was shedded, and 97% was under 18%. So we've seen a massive improvement in quality over the country, and I would put that down to a few things. One, the industry education that's going on around quality and the recognition of quality, but also the dry year always improves quality. The Crone 8-string and the Massey high density and high compaction balers are also helping significantly. And so previously we've had when we've done these numbers, we've put numbers like that up on the screen, but then when we say what percentage satisfies all criteria simultaneously, we've seen that as low as 4.6% only a few years ago. So a few years ago, it was 4.6% satisfying all those criteria simultaneously. Last year, we saw a massive improvement with 36.81% of hay inspected through Feed Central satisfying all of the above criteria. So that's a massive improvement, and it's a big congratulations to all growers in the Feed Central system for a continued focus on quality. And we all know if we focus on quality, we're helping our buyers, and when we help our buyers, we help ourselves.
Welcome everybody, thank you. Thank you Tim, and delighted to be part of the 2020-21 Feed Central Hay Grower Awards on behalf of the Australian Fodder Industry Association, the industry's peak body. Congratulations to Tim, Kieran and the Feed Central team for these hay quality awards, recognising these hay producers who can produce a quality product is a great initiative, and thank you Feed Central for this. If we think about hay and quality hay as part of an integrated supply chain, it is vitally important. We have an expectation in this country that when we go to our supermarkets, we will have ready access to high quality, safe and nutritious dairy products, beef products and lamb products. And that is in no small part thanks to quality producers who appreciate, understand and demand that to achieve this quality, they need access to high quality hay and other feed sources. There's also a very strong element of consideration of animal welfare in this too. These Feed Central Hay Grower Awards recognise the contributions, the important contributions our industry makes to this integrated supply chain, capable of producing high quality, safe and nutritious products for Australian consumers. I commend the efforts of these award winners as high quality hay producers, and I commend Feed Central for recognising and celebrating their efforts and contributions. Once again, on behalf of AFIA, sincere congratulations to all of the 2021 Feed Central Hay Grower Award recipients. Outstanding work and long may it continue. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, John. Your support is greatly appreciated today. And
Pleasure.
I'd also like to congratulate all of the winners personally, and make a special note that there's a number of regular winners there. I mentioned that there's a very significant investment to make good quality hay. It always amazes me when I visit a farm and there's a a tractor worth a few $100,000, and a steamer worth a couple $100,000, and a baler worth a few $100,000, and rakes and all the ancillary equipment and investment, plus the sheds and the transport and everything to make a quality article. Us recognizing the effort that goes into that is a very, very small thing compared to the financial and emotional and business investment in making such a quality product. So congratulations to all. I mentioned before that it's Feed Central 18th year, and looking through the list of people on this webinar, there was around 200 people on the webinar, and there's just an acknowledgement to a number of those people that have been with us for all or the majority of those 18 years. So thank you for your support. It was also great to see a few new people that have come on board in the last couple of years win some awards, especially our friends from the Riverina. As a Riverina boy, born and bred, I love to see the Riverina guys improving their hay production each year. So congratulations to everybody. We have a few. We're moving into the question and answer session. We've got a number of questions coming up. So feel free to put those questions through to us. We might just ask Kieran and Nev to join me on the screen as a panel, and we might go to any questions that are coming through. So feel free to answer the question, to ask any questions you might like to get started. Yeah, we've got a few questions. Oh, Katie and Lockie Donald will go straight to you. That's not a question. Great. You've normally got something. You've normally got a tough question for me, Lockie, from the back of the audience somewhere. You've normally got a tough question for me, but today it's a compliment. So thank you.
Is there any fodder move at the moment from Beck?
Beck Wolf from Peacock's Transport. Is there much fodder movement at the moment? No, Beck. As per the slide there, we did the majority of our sales in the first half of the year. Of course, there's a few deals happening all the time. I'll just let Nev always got something to say. So what have you got to say to that, Nev?
Well, Beck, there's just little bits here and there, with much of the east part of Australia being very wet at the moment, and with a lot of fodder and a lot of blokes throwing the back gate open and letting the cattle out. They'd rather do that rather than have hay on a truck moving up their driveway. So that will change if we get a little bit of cold weather. It will change. There will be a little bit more moving. So we'll look forward to seeing some more hay going on your trucks.
Andrew Welch has always got a tough question. What are your thoughts on the market acceptance of glyphosate of topped hay? Andrew, I'd say that so long as it's within withholding periods, and my understanding of glyphosate or Roundup applied at harvest or just prior to harvest is within holding periods. And if it's within withholding periods, the market acceptance will be okay. Essential that it's noted on the commodity vendor declaration. There's a lot of movement in some sections of the market in relation to putting in place systems and procedures to be checking the commodity vendor declarations. And so as long as it's noted on the commodity vendor declaration and within withholding periods, then we would say there's no big problems to it. It's a tool in the toolbox to help make quality hay, especially during a very wet year.
Fungicides would be probably anything there.
Yeah, Kieran's been doing a lot of work on fungicides, so you want to add to, so I might just answer that question, Kieran, in relation to fungicides on straw, particularly in barley.
Yeah. So on the fungicide side of things, the main thing it's not about withholding periods. It's about the export slaughter interval, which is what they call as the ESI. The difficulty of ESIs is that if you look at labelling of fungicides, it's actually not noted under the withholding periods or even in its own section. it's actually only noted under the trade advice. So it's either missed or misrepresented and not known of at all. So there are three particular fungicides, and I won't name them off now, but there are three particular fungicides that we know of that we do need to stay away from. And then there is one there that if you combine it with another, again, you need to stay away from it. The issue is there that it doesn't go away. So, and the problem is for the market, the feeding market, is that for an export slaughter interval, that means if that animal was in a feedlot feeding on hay or straw that had that fungicide applied, depending on the fungicide, it would actually need to be on clean feed. Some are 3 days, some are 5 days, and some are up to 7 days. And that's just not a viable thing to do for these for any feeding operation. So they would have to be on clean feed for that period of time before they could actually go to slaughter. So that just can't be handled. The system can't handle that. So that's vital at the moment. Now, testing is happening now. When I say testing at the slaughter sites, because all of these things have certainly become high on the agenda for export. So yeah, be very, very careful of those, and I can certainly provide. We certainly have, and furthermore provide the information on those fungicides.
So glyphosate at this stage, okay.
Yes. Within withholding periods of cutting.
Yeah, be very careful with fungicides and cutting hay or straw that's been applied with fungicide during the production season due to issues around the export slaughter interval. So we've got another question here from Colin Peace. Where do you see the capacity to store hay move to recently? So as a general comment there, we've seen the increase in shedding across the country has been massive. I don't have any numbers on that. Colin, you're the numbers man. You might be able to share some numbers with us in future on the volume or the increase in storage capacity across the country. The volume of storage has in on-farm storage, and it needed to, because the market is there for stored hay. Sometimes it's there longer than other years, and specifically this year, we're encouraging people to make enough hay to fill their sheds, but not necessarily have a whole heap of stuff stacked outside. That would be move forward in that area with caution. Question from Gregor Hurd. Do you see Vic producers after a big season last year looking to store hay an extended period rather than try and sell into a tough market? Nev, do you want to?
Well, we will see hay stored from this year, the 20 year into 21. We will see that because the market has softened, and yes, it will be a tough market. You're right. Yes, we will see hay stored for an extended period. But over my experience over the last 10 years in hay, we've seen sheds cleaning up. In some years where you get a dry time, you'll see all that stored hay move. So
we only need to see a dry autumn, and we've got a significant spike in the hay market in 2021. So it's an individual grower's decision, but we've seen plenty of years when you think the hay's never going to sell, and all of a sudden it's all sold. Katie and Lockie McDonald got a good question for us. How do you see the transport with road trains, oversized vehicles going into the future? I think we won't hand back to John McHugh here now, but that's definitely an issue that AFIA would be great to see AFIA continue to work very hard in this area. The exemptions made around the roads for the drought-related exemptions to get transport into more areas was a gigantic improvement. The time it takes for carriers to get permits and so forth is a really big issue. And so it'd be great for the likes of AFIA to continue lobbying in that regard, so that we see much easier to get the permits and that the exemptions remain, because they make a really big difference to the ability to move product economically. So Rachel Windrum. Quick question to check price ballpark expectation. Did you say cereal hay 150 for export oat and hay and 250 for export barley and wheat? Not sure what I said there, Rachel, but what I meant was that export quality oat and hay is probably going to be, higher, around the 250 mark from what we've been told. And the wheat and barley on the domestic market and oat and hay that doesn't satisfy export is probably going to be closer to the 150 to 200 mark. So just to clarify that, yes, the exporter would have the higher price there than the domestic market this year. The main difference between the export and the domestic market would be your moisture levels between 14% versus the 18% in the domestic market.
Those prices would drop as the grades, obviously your grades drop within that market as well, of what you're taking in on those particular grades.
And we're not in fine-tuned detail over what individual export companies are paying, so you'd be best to make direct contact with them to get exact information.
Nev, you might be able to answer Anthony Exton's question.
Anthony has a question there. What sort of market is it going to be for mixed species hay, vetch, turnip, wheat, tillage, radish, mixes, etc.? Anthony, there's always a market for a mixed hays, but get it right as far as making it so that you have it cured right. There's less than 18% moisture. It's in good heavy bales. That mix or mixes will always sell, and there's a demand for them.
I'll answer Beck's questions. Beck Wolf. Thanks, Beck. Know you well. So in regards, she's got a question there. Have you had much customer feedback on hay that's being produced using steamers? I'll put my piece in there, and Nev might have something different, but not really. I think the steamer factor for most operators are all about in the efficiencies of the operation itself and getting that extending periods of baling and of course working on quality. So if it's producing the same quality and the outcome is the same, I don't see any really great particular feedback that we've received on it. As far as aroma is concerned, I have probably a bit of a battle with myself. I test myself if I've got product coming in that's coming into the lab that has been, if it's lucerne as an example, it's been done by a steamer and one not being done by a steamer. Is the aroma affected by any way, shape or form? Look, maybe you can pick it a little bit, but again, you'd need a pretty good nose to do that. And, I've got a reasonable one, and sometimes you do see a little bit of a difference. But at the end of the day, as far as customer feedback, no, we're not necessarily seeing
Under the odd chaff mill will have a little bit on aroma. Sometimes they say, look,
yes,
as a steamer being used on this product, that we find that the aroma is not quite as strong.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that at all. We'll just have a look through.
Is the webinar available to watch again later? Yes, the webinar will be posted to the website later. We'll send out an email with the link. And there's a question there that we'll get John McHugh to follow up directly after the meeting with that question. We'll pass that.
I've just typed an answer to that one, Tim, to the question.
Okay. You're still connected?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
So, well, the question is,
which one was that one?
Lockie Donald's question.
Transport?
No. It was Lockie Donald's question about coronavirus. There you go. No, down. Maybe the question was: is AFIA being involved in the quarantine period in relation to agricultural workers across the Victoria-New South Wales border? It was around that. Can you answer that, John?
Look, I can, Tim. AFIA is part of the weekly Victorian Government Department of Ag COVID response meetings. So I've been on one of those webinars this morning with the Victorian Government, and we had presentations from both South Australia and New South Wales about the impact of COVID restrictions and the movement of workers. There are a range of concerns we as an industry or ag industries have about the movement of workers and products It is a work in progress. It seems to me that both the Victorian government, the New South Wales government and the South Australian government are all trying to do the right thing. But we just have to be patient as we work through some of these issues. But I think we are making good progress in terms of continuing to make sure agriculture is treated as an essential service going forward. But we will continue to make the appropriate representations of our industry through those forums on a weekly basis. If anyone has got specific concerns, I would welcome them to email me directly, and I can take those issues up directly with the Victorian government, who, as I say, we're speaking to weekly.
John, the other issue, have you got a comment around the drought-related exemptions to transport routes, and is there work being done to try and keep those exemptions in place forever?
Not at this stage. There's no work being conducted on that, Tim, because we've all been somewhat hijacked by another issue, as we're all aware of. But I think that as a point of follow-up for myself and AFIA to make representation on behalf of the industry is something we really do need to do, yes. So I'm happy to take that one on board as on my to-do list.
Yeah, that's probably one of the big issues for the industry is freight, and the work that's been done in Victoria with BBB triple and road train access through northern Victoria has opened up markets that have made a big difference. That's why in my slide there earlier I talked about location, and if you're on a road train route, it's starting to really help differentiate your product. So look, we might wrap the webinar up there. Thanks again, John, for your input. Thank you for everybody attending. There's been a large crowd online. Thank you to Jock and the team here at Feed Central for organising it. We're just about to have lunch. Don't ring us because our phones will be off for the next 20 minutes or so. We've got some premium rib fillet from one of our very good customers. So we'll taste every ounce of premium oat and hay that's gone into that rib fillet in the next half hour or so. So thank you everyone for your time. It's been a pleasure preparing and presenting our first webinar.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.